Welcome to the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast, where we take the mystery out of today's top security threats and solutions. Cyber threats are not only increasing, but evolving. Keeping up is more than a full-time job. And that is why many business owners and IT leaders turn to cybersecurity experts. Should they be looking for MSPs or MSSPs? What's the difference? Today's guest has some deep thoughts about this and other pressing cybersecurity questions. In this episode of Cybersecurity Simplified, we will chat with Mr.MSP himself, Charles Weaver, CEO of the MSP Alliance. Stay tuned. Welcome to the show. I'm your co-host, Susanna Song.
And I'm Dave Barton.
Hey, David.
Good afternoon.
Well, David, we tout ourselves as the security podcast, sans acronyms, right? Without any acronyms or jargon. And here we are talking about the difference between MSP and MSSP. And Charles, and you have some very strong opinions, and I appreciate it because we do cater to a lot of MSPs and bring in kind of their story in transitioning to becoming an MSSP. And I know that you have a particular opinion about that. So can you kind of share maybe the evolution of the MSP journey as cybersecurity becomes such a relevant and pertinent service to their customers?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to, Susanna. And thank you for having me on the podcast. A pleasure. If we could, I think it would be helpful, at least I find it helpful, and I think your listeners and viewers might find it helpful as well, to separate for the time being the security requirements and best practices and expectations that we have of MSPs and the MSP, MSSP acronym and what do we call them discussion, because they are very different. Part of that podcast that you referenced is a reference to the naming convention, the marketing, the how do we call ourselves, classify ourselves, which isn't as trite as that may sound, because it actually gets to how are we being regulated, right? Because there are people who are writing laws right now using terms like MSP, MSSP, and it's important for them as well as the general public to have an accurate understanding of what they should be expecting from MSPs. So my whole philosophy in that episode and generally where I sit today is I think that all MSPs, no matter what they do, should be paying a very close attention to their own internal security, bar none. I mean, I don't care what you do as an MSP. If you are doing just basic router, switch, hub functionality, right? The basic vanilla managed services from 20, 30 years ago, you still have to be paying attention to your own internal security operations. There's a second issue, which I think is even more important or as important, which is what do the MSPs do for their customers and what will the customers allow the MSP to do? And that does get into what are the qualifications, the capabilities of the MSP, and should they call themselves an MSSP, and a whole host of other derivative questions.
Yeah, this is all wonderful, and I would love to get to all of this. My first question is, as you've stated, you really believe that there is a distinction there isn't a distinction between MSPs and MSSPs in terms of, what they are actually doing. I know you've referenced before that it's not like MSPs before they quote unquote became MSSPs. They weren't securing their own internal network or their customers' networks. I mean, they have a responsibility, right? They went into their jobs and their careers and started their own businesses with the idea of managing and protecting their customers, correct?
That's very true. So again, I try not to speak in absolutes because the managed services profession, and I fancy myself a student of the MSP profession because I've been doing this for a long time, longer than most, and I still have a lot to learn. And this profession is very diverse, very dynamic, and changes all the time. And it's a challenge just to keep up. But you're absolutely right. The MSPs from 20 years ago, it's not like they were avoiding firewalls and UTM devices and the security applications and technologies that were available then. A lot of them were doing it. Mm-hmm. The MSPs today find themselves in an accelerated ecosystem of having to do more to protect themselves against attack, and also having to do more for their customers who have been, to date, somewhat reluctant to spend the money and to actually do things that we know are very effective, but for reasons, a variety of reasons, they just have been unwilling to do it. So I think that is a dynamic of monumental proportions, and the MSPs are caught up in the center of it. And that's kind of where I see things today.
Any challenges as you talk to MSPs? What is their biggest challenge as they go to their customers with a security offering?
There's two major issues. The number one of those challenges is certainly talent. The availability of reasonable, cost-effective, trained MSP-specific cyber talent, meaning that they are not just graduates from a cybersecurity vocational institute, of which there are many, but they actually have some work experience, or at least they have some functioning knowledge of the MSP tools that they use. Because being in cybersecurity for an enterprise business, although there are some similarities, there's a lot of unique elements to working in an MSP shop, right? The process is different. The attack vectors can be different. The tools can be very different. So that's one area. The talent has been a challenge. Number two, it has been the inability of the MSP to say with convincing teeth, you have a reason to be concerned as a end user, and you should be doing more to protect yourself. Because the response has typically been, oh, but you're the MSP, you'll take care of that, right? Mm-hmm. Which has been a problem, because that's what a lot of MSPs have said in the past several decades. But now it's getting to the point where the MSPs are being told, hey, you should actually step back from doing a lot of things that may be risky to your MSP practice. And so there's kind of a meeting of the minds of end users and MSPs, and we're trying to get them closer together. But that's the second big challenge, I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because we did a whole article after talking with some MSPs who are very transparent and honest with us. And when they came to Overwatch, they said, you know what, the reality is our customers actually think we are doing a lot of security beyond firewalls. And if they got breached, they'd come to us and say, why weren't you protecting us at that level, right? With EDR, NDR.
I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges that maybe we haven't touched on yet is two challenges. One, there's a volume of tool sets that are, some are good, some are bad. And the traditional MSPs don't know what the right tools are, right? And this is where I think there's a distinction between being an MSP and being an MSSP. Number two is those MSPs don't do cybersecurity as their only job, versus more of the more evolved MSSPs. This is all that we do. This is all we do here at Highwire is we do nothing but cybersecurity. So we live it, breathe it, eat it, sleep it, if we get to sleep. And I think, Charles, that's the distinction for me between an MSP and an MSSP is, where's the primary focus? The primary focus in most MSPs is uptime and availability, not necessarily the confidentiality that you see in the three-legged stool around cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And so that's where I see, Susanna, the difference. And I think, to your point, Charles, one of the biggest challenges is how do we get those closer to each other, right? Doing your own security, to me, that's a default. If you're an MSP and you're not protecting yourself, you're not going to be in business very long. But the bigger thing is, and in even protecting your customers, there is some expectation that I'm going to do basic blocking and tackling. But again, I'm not looking at packet captures as an MSP, seeing trends across multiple customers that I wouldn't see because I don't live that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that the tools have been lagging for some time, and now they are catching up with a vengeance. I mean, we're certainly seeing the private equity community throwing a lot of money at cybersecurity tools, specifically some for MSPs. They're doing quite well. Mandiant, a huge player in the cybersecurity space, just got bought by Google, this week. So, there's a lot of movement and a lot of money. So the tools are catching up. I also agree with you that there are some MSPs who, and I want to be careful about how I say this, but the MSP community, I said before, is very diverse. So you will have, especially at the upper levels of the mid-market, definitely at the enterprise, where you start to get very vertical focused. And the MSP may not have the relationship or be delivering the service that creeps into the security, firewall, UTM, the SIM, products that a smaller MSP would. And so the smaller the MSP is today, almost the more incumbent is upon them to deliver those security solutions for their customers, because the customers are probably not going to be getting it from anybody else. That MSP relationship, it's their one throat.
That's all they got.
That's right. That's all they have. So I do agree with it. I think that it would be incredibly challenging for a smaller MSP to build out a SOC themselves.
It is. It's
makes
impossible.
more sense to outsource it, partner, and stay true to what they're doing. But at the same time, I think they need to know the issues, and I think they need to know the high level security threat vectors that face their customers, because without that, that's just the blind application of a technology, which won't help.
I agree completely.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. David does this really well for our team. Is you're bringing the security expertise that some MSPs, while they do know basic security, they don't know all the tools. They don't have a degree in cybersecurity or all the credentials, so they can focus on the value they bring to their customers and go to an outsourced SOC or an MSSP to deliver a more tier 3 high level cybersecurity education to their customers.
Very true. Very true. And you just mentioned education. I think that's another element of what the MSPs need to be doing, even if they don't develop them themselves. There are plenty of third-party, partnerships that are available. The MSPs need to be training and educating, and then they also need to be saying, this is the service that you need to be doing. If you're not buying it from us, you should be buying it from somebody else. Because if you're not consuming it, you are a danger to me and to every other managed customer I have. And that is it's a very delicate position to be in today, because you don't want to push away the customers, but at the same time, we're starting to see that there's a real threat of an unprotected domain or network or system. And if they don't take it seriously, it's a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and anyone that's around is going to be hurt potentially. And that's where I feel for a lot of MSPs who need to be evolving faster in that area.
Yeah. Any thoughts around kind of the future of the managed service provider, their focus? David, you said it, if they're not offering security, they're not going to be around for long. I mean, what are some of your predictions for the MSP community?
Look, I mean, it's not like we haven't seen this before. So we saw it in the mid 2000s with backup, right? Where we saw a big gap of, it wasn't just backup. It was also multi-factor authentication. It was also password management. We had some really horrible password management practices in the profession, not that long ago. We fixed it. And you now have really good tools that are easily accessible to MSPs. I really think that this is the same situation. We're going to get very quickly to a point where all the MSPs downstream are getting the benefit of, let's face it, this is not new technology. It's existed for a long time at the enterprise level, and it's been slowly filtering down. We're just now at a crucial intersection of society and our global life that we live, that the MSPs are in a position to actually help their customers, and they have technologies that are affordable. So I would say, Susanna, it's a very high likelihood that the MSPs are going to meet this challenge. They will continue to source partners like you guys. They're going to continue to evolve and meet the challenges that they're faced with. I think there's a whole separate issue of what do we do with the non-MSPs, the break-fix companies, who are still out there, still a lot of them struggling from the pandemic. That's maybe another episode, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
David, any last questions before we wrap up?
I don't know about questions. I think Charles is right. I think you're also going to see a convergence of the MSP and MSSP. And I, right now in the US, Charles, you probably have better numbers than I do, but there are thousands of them. And it's not, I don't know if it's scalable. I don't know if that many is the right number. So I expect you'll see some consolidation there. Tool sets, right? And I think Charles is right. We built enterprise tools that have been around a long time, and the security vendors figured out that if they want to continue to grow their wallet, they have to go after the mid-market SMB space. Mm-hmm. And that means they've got to do more with those same tool sets that they deliver to the enterprise. And so we're finally seeing multi-tenancy and role-based access controls and things that make those tool sets attainable and scalable for those smaller players. There's tons of smaller players. The tool sets weren't there yet. So I think Charles is right on the money. We're going to see more of these enterprise quality tools become available. That's what we do here, right? We do the very same thing. I do think you'll see even more specialization in cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. I think you'll see a pivot away from some of the commodity type MSP services into more pure play cybersecurity, because that's where the fear is. That's where the investment is. And frankly, can I manage a PC? Can I manage a help desk? Can I do uptime, break fix? Yeah, that's commodity based, right? It doesn't take as much knowledge and skill base, if you will. And I'm not, don't read it wrong. I'm not saying that those people aren't good at what they do, but there's going to be less need for that and more need for, holy crap, I see this behavior that's coming from Russia, happens to be coinciding with some world event. What do we do? Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's where I see, if we were talking about predictions and projections, those are some of the things I see in addition to what Charles is saying. I think he's right on the money.
Yeah. Final thoughts, Charles?
No, it's going to be a very exciting next several years. I do think that we're going to see consolidation in the cybersecurity tool vendor space, like the Mandiants. You're going to see a lot more of that, because that's where the money, just on the financial side, the investments and the investors are going to push that. Yep. You're going to see more tools that are built for MSPs. To your point earlier, the multi-tenancy, the mm-hmm. MSP characteristics that need to be there for these tools to be relevant to the downstream MSPs and their customers. You're already seeing that starting to evolve, and that's going to continue. I think honestly we need more MSPs, because the consolidation issue has been around for as long as I've been here, and every time we see a quote unquote consolidation period, we see more MSPs being created. So I don't know if it's a consolidation or if it's just an inefficiency skimming off the market, where the inefficient operators and teams are being, kind of culled, and creating, fresh ground for new growth.
Yeah, I agree.
Well said. Yeah. Well, thank you, Charles. This was very, very informative. I appreciate you taking time to be part of our podcast. I know you're very busy.
Happy to be a part of it. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you have feedback about today's podcast or questions for David or the Overwatch team, please reach out and make sure to like this episode and subscribe if you enjoyed today's conversation. Be sure to join us for our next episode of the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast. Until next time, I'm Susanna Song.
And I'm David Barton.
And this is Cybersecurity Simplified. From all of us here at Overwatch by Highwire Networks, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast. To learn more, visit us at highwirenetworks.com/podcast.